Elias had never expected to find anything alive out in the tundra. Not out here, in the vast emptiness where the wind howled and the snow seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. His small igloo, nestled beneath the shadows of towering ice formations, had been his sanctuary for months now, a refuge from the brutal cold that could swallow a man whole. He had come here to escape the world, to leave behind the noise, the endless demands of civilization, and to immerse himself in the quiet. The ice, the snow, the solitude. They were all he needed. Most days, he would wander the icy plains, mapping the terrain, searching for artifacts buried deep beneath the frozen crust, his breath puffing out in crystalline clouds. He didn't mind the isolation. He never had. It gave him a sense of purpose, a feeling of closeness to the unknown, to the mysteries buried beneath the earth. Yet, as the days passed, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of creeping unease, as though something was just beyond the edge of his perception, something he couldn't name. It was the middle of a violent snowstorm when it happened. Elias had been inside the igloo, watching the storm rage from the safety of his humble shelter, the fire crackling softly in the stove, warming the air around him. The wind outside screamed, its icy tendrils seeping through every crack in the igloo, threatening to breach his walls of ice. It was as if the world beyond was alive with the fury of some ancient force, one that would have no mercy for anyone foolish enough to be caught outside. And then there was a flash. A bright, sharp streak of light shot across the sky, brighter than any meteor he had seen. The brilliance of it was dazzling, enough to pierce through the swirling snow and light up the landscape as if it were day. Elias's heart raced. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was unmistakable. Something had fallen from the heavens. A storm blew in. His curiosity flared, pushing him out of the igloo and into the storm. Wrapped in thick layers of furs, Elias braved the blinding snow, stumbling through the drifts with determination. His boots crunched in the snow with each step, his breath escaping in puffs of vapor. The world around him was a blur of white, but he pressed on, driven by something he couldn't name, a compulsion to find the source of that mysterious light. It didn't take long before he found it. Crawling through the snow, just beyond a ridge, was a figure, a strange, almost ethereal silhouette, moving erratically through the storm, struggling against the elements. Elias's heart skipped a beat. The figure was humanoid, but not quite. It shimmered, its body flickering with a soft violet glow, the skin almost translucent, as though it were not entirely of this world. Long strands of silver hair floated behind it like wisps, caught in the wind, adding to its otherworldly appearance. The alien, Elias realized with shock, was crawling, its limbs trembling from the cold, as though the strength had been drained from its body. Every movement seemed laborious, as though it were fighting against an unseen force, its energy slowly being sapped by the unforgiving cold. Without thinking, Elias rushed forward, dropping to his knees in the snow. He could see the alien's eyes now, large, luminescent orbs that glowed faintly in the storm, reflecting a mixture of fear and desperation. They were locked on him, pleading silently for help. Elias hesitated only a moment. What was he doing? He didn't even know if this was real or some trick of the mind. But there was no time to question. The alien was in need, and something deep within Elias stirred. Without another thought, he grabbed the alien's delicate frame and lifted it, guiding it toward the warmth of his igloo. The alien's body was shockingly cold, almost painfully so. Its skin felt like ice against his hands, and Elias could feel its shivers even through his thick gloves. He moved as quickly as he could, urging the fragile figure along, through the snow and toward the safety of his shelter. By the time they reached the igloo, Elias was out of breath, his muscles aching from the exertion. He didn't waste any time. He shoved open the entrance, dragging the alien inside and collapsing with it onto the floor. The warmth of the igloo enveloped them, the heat from the fire slowly beginning to melt the frost from their bodies. The alien's skin glowed faintly in the dim light of the fire, a shimmering blue and violet hue, almost ethereal against the cold darkness of the storm outside. Elias stood over her, unsure of what to do next. The alien collapsed onto the floor, her body shivering violently, her limbs twitching as though struggling to regain control. Elias quickly wrapped her in the furs from his bed, trying to warm her as best as he could. He built up the fire again, feeding the flames with extra wood. But the alien's condition seemed dire. "Please, help me," a soft, melodic voice whispered. Elias looked down in shock, realizing that the alien was speaking. Her voice was like nothing he had ever heard, a melodic, almost musical tone, but broken and strained. Her words were halting, her breath shallow. Elias knelt beside her, unsure of what to say. He didn't even know how to respond. He had heard rumors of alien encounters, of beings who had wandered into human settlements. But this was different. This was something he had never imagined. "I'm here," Elias said, his voice soft, though it trembled with uncertainty. "You're safe now." "Next," Prince Andrew said. The alien's silvery eyes flickered toward him, locking with his gaze. She reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed against his arm. "Warmth. Please," she whispered, her voice growing weaker. Elias didn't know what to make of it. Was she cold, or was there something more? He didn't know, but the urgency in her eyes was undeniable. "Stay here. I'll get you more blankets," he said. But as he stood, the alien's hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "Not just warmth," she said, her voice almost pleading. "More. I need more." Elias froze. The words struck him like a jolt of electricity. More? What did she mean? Was she asking for something else, something deeper than physical warmth? Elias had seen 3 other people have access to the caving facility and determined its presence. One of them said they may get higher levels of intelligence and concentration. "More?" Elias repeated, his voice a whisper. "What do you mean?" The alien's eyes darkened, and she seemed to struggle with herself for a moment. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she fought to regain her strength, the glow from her skin dimming and then brightening as if her body itself was trying to recover from some terrible strain. "I am from another world," she said, her words slow and deliberate now, as though every word was an effort. "I crashed. My vessel malfunctioned. The cold, it weakened me. But I am not just a traveler. I am a seeker. I came here to find something, to heal." Elias couldn't hide his confusion. The alien looked at him, her eyes reflecting something ancient and sorrowful. "It is not just the cold," she said softly. "It is more than that. My people, we possess the knowledge to heal, but it requires energy. Your warmth, your life force, it is stronger than you know." Elias recoiled slightly, taken aback by the words. Life force? Was she asking for something more than his help? Something beyond the physical warmth of the fire? "Are you asking me to give you my energy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is that what you need?" The alien nodded, her expression weary but resolute. "Yes," she said simply. "The cold of this world has drained me, but there is something in you. Your energy, your life force, that can help me heal. Please, Elias. I need it. I cannot survive without it." Elias stood there, frozen in place. the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't know what to make of it, didn't know if this was a deception or the truth. He had lived a life of isolation, far from any human civilization, and now here, in the midst of this storm, was a creature from another world, asking for something he wasn't sure he could give. The silence between them stretched on, heavy with the unspoken tension of an unknown future. "I don't know if I can give you that," Elias said finally, his voice strained. "I don't even know if I can help you fix your ship, or if you can survive without it. But I'll try. I'll help you however I can. But I need to understand more." The alien's eyes softened and she reached out again, this time more gently, her hand brushing his arm with an unexpected tenderness. "I will explain everything," she said, her voice a soft whisper in the quiet warmth of the igloo. "But first, I need to heal. I need you to help me, Elias. If you don't, I won't survive this cold. Please." Elias looked down at her, the weight of her gaze pulling him in. He didn't know what this meant, or what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had just become entwined with something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. And there was no turning back now. Elias sat across from the alien, the firelight flickering in the small igloo, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls made of ice. The storm raged outside, a constant roar against the icy walls, but inside the igloo it was warm, almost too warm for the chill that still clung to the air. Elias couldn't help but glance at the alien, her shimmering skin now less pale, no longer reflecting the hollow light of the storm. She seemed stronger, more alive as the warmth from the fires seeped into her bones. Yet there was something unnerving about her. Her eyes glowed with a strange intensity, a light that felt both foreign and familiar at the same time, as though she were not fully present in this world. She shifted slightly, her delicate frame barely disturbing the furs that enveloped her. Her gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking, almost uncomfortably so, as if she were waiting for him to say something. Anything. Elias found his throat dry. He didn't know what to say, or how to react. The situation was beyond anything he had ever prepared for. He had studied isolated landscapes, ancient civilizations buried under ice. But never had he encountered anything like this. "I don't understand," he finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You're asking me for my life force, my energy. What does that mean? What will you do with it?" The alien blinked, her silvery eyes softening. She lifted a trembling hand to her chest, as if to steady herself. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but there was an undertone of exhaustion that seemed to weigh heavily on each word. "I am not asking for your life, Elias," she said slowly, as though choosing her words carefully. "Only a portion of your energy. I am weakened, as you saw. The cold of this planet has drained me, but not in the way you think. I am not like your people. My species is different. We do not survive in the same way. We feed not on food, but on energy, on warmth, on life forces. My people do the same, and we have learned to harvest it without harm. I have not harmed anyone, Elias. I would never pit upon you." Her words hung in the air, and Elias felt a strange shiver crawl down his spine. Though the fire was warm, almost too warm, he leaned back slightly, watching her carefully, his mind racing. "And you expect me to just give it to you? To trust you?" His voice held more disbelief than anger. He didn't know what to make of her. He had no frame of reference for such an encounter. Everything he had studied had never touched on anything even close to this. The alien's gaze softened even more, and she slowly shook her head. "I understand your hesitation. I do not ask lightly. I only ask for enough to heal. I have no other choice. To activate the abilities of your tool." Elias ran a hand through his hair, trying to sort through his thoughts. He had read enough about alien encounters in theoretical papers, but no one had ever warned him about something like this. She seemed so fragile, so different, and yet there was a pull to her, a strange magnetism that made him feel both protective and wary. It was as if the lines between right and wrong had blurred completely, and he had no idea where to begin. The alien's voice broke through his thoughts again, soft but insistent. "I cannot survive in this cold without help, and you are the only one here." She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm once more. "I do not mean harm. I need only enough energy to restore myself, and once I am restored, I will leave. I will find my people. You have my word." Her touch lingered for a moment, and despite himself, Elias felt his resolve begin to waver. There was something about her that wasn't just alien. It was sorrowful. He could see it in her eyes. She had not chosen this path, had not wanted to end up stranded on this frozen wasteland. The storm outside felt like a metaphor for the storm she had been through, and somehow it felt wrong to turn his back on her. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His life had always been solitary, focused on his studies, on uncovering the secrets of the planet. He had never been involved in anything larger than himself. But now, standing before this being from another world, he realized how small and insignificant his world had become. The idea of energy, that there was something beyond physical warmth, beyond what he could see and touch, fascinated him. Perhaps it was his curiosity, his unyielding need to understand the unknown, that led him to respond. "You say you need energy, but why me?" he asked, his voice quieter now, tinged with something he couldn't identify. "Why my life force? What makes me different from you?" The alien seemed to consider his question for a long moment, her gaze steady and piercing. "It is not that you are different," she replied softly. "It is that you are the only one here. Your kind. Your life force is stronger than most. It is not an imbalance, but a natural harmony. My kind has adapted to feed on such energy without harm. We do not harm those who give. We do not take what we do not need." Elias felt his pulse quicken, his heart pounding against his ribs. There was something almost hypnotic in the way she spoke, in the way she looked at him. He had seen many things in his life, had studied the unexplainable, but nothing had prepared him for this. Could he really trust her? Could he risk it? "What will happen if you don't get what you need?" he asked, his voice low, more out of fear than anything else. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, and he felt a strange sense of foreboding tighten in his chest. Her eyes lowered for a moment, and when she looked back up, her gaze was filled with quiet resignation. "I will die," she said simply. "I will not survive without it. The cold. It takes more than just your warmth. It is my life force that has been drained. I have no choice. Without it, I will wither, fade. It is the only way." Elias swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. He didn't know what to say. How could he answer something like that? How could he live with himself knowing that he had a chance to save her but didn't take it? But how could he give something so personal, so intangible? It felt like a line he couldn't cross. The alien's gaze never wavered, her large, luminous eyes fixed on him with a quiet intensity that made his heart race even faster. She said nothing more, as if waiting for him to decide. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope, both fragile and unbreakable at once. Elias finally exhaled, his breath shaky. He had never been a man who easily gave up control, but something in her, something about the way she spoke, the way she had looked at him, The way her words resonated deep within him made him realize that he was already part of this strange dance. He was already intertwined with her fate, whether he liked it or not. "Okay," he said, his voice tight with both fear and a strange kind of resolve. "I'll help you." The alien's face softened, and for a moment it was as if a veil had been lifted from her expression. Her features softened and she almost seemed to glow with relief, her skin shimmering brighter in the firelight. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a soft song. "I will not forget this." Elias nodded, his mind still reeling. He didn't know what would come next, or if he had made the right choice, but there was no turning back now. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the igloo, the quiet warmth of the fire felt suddenly fragile, as though it might slip through his fingers at any moment. The alien moved closer, her body still trembling, but now more from anticipation than from the cold. She stretched out her hand once more, this time gently cupping his face. Her touch was colder than he expected, but there was something comforting in it, something deeply intimate. "I will take only what I need," she said softly, her voice soothing in the dim light. "You will feel nothing, I promise." Elias took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as he closed his eyes. His body felt warm, almost too warm, and his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts he couldn't quite catch. But there was a strange sense of trust in the alien's words, in the quiet desperation that lingered in the air. Slowly she drew nearer, her breath mingling with his, and he felt the strange pull of something unexplainable, the exchange of energy, of life forces, something that had never been part of his reality. He had no idea what would happen, but somehow, in that moment, he knew that the universe was much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And so, as the storm raged outside, Elias's world shifted, unseen, unspoken, yet deeply felt. The air in the igloo was thick with anticipation as the alien, her body still trembling from the cold, sat close to Elias. Her silvery eyes never left him, her gaze steady but filled with an unspoken plea. Elias was uncertain, his heart racing as he stared into her luminous eyes, the warmth from the fire flickering between them, the flames casting long shadows on the walls of ice. It felt as though the world outside no longer existed. There was only the two of them, bound by something inexplicable, a bond forged through her plea for help, and now through his willingness to trust her. She moved closer, her breath cold but steady, as it mingled with the heat from the fire. Elias felt a strange pulse in the air, a faint hum that seemed to emanate from her. It was almost imperceptible, like the vibrations of a far-off star, distant but powerful. He could feel it deep within him, a sense of connection he couldn't fully understand. The alien reached out once more, her hand gliding toward his. Her fingers, pale and delicate, brushed against his skin, sending a jolt through him. It was not a shock, but a strange warmth that spread from the point of contact, as though her touch was somehow filling the empty spaces in his soul. His body responded instinctively, and he found himself drawn to her in a way that he couldn't quite explain. There was something magnetic about her, something ancient and yet painfully fragile. "I know you do not understand," she said softly, her voice low and melodic, yet laced with a sadness that Elias could feel deep within his chest. "But I must do this. I need it to survive. You need only give what you can spare." Elias nodded, his throat tight with emotion. There was a part of him that still felt like this was all a dream, some fevered hallucination brought on by too much isolation. But the feeling of her hand on his, the pull of something deep and ancient, told him otherwise. This was real. She was real. And he was, in some way, tied to her fate. "Tell me what to do," he said, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. I'll help you. Just, please, don't fade." The alien's eyes softened, and she leaned in, her breath brushing against his cheek. The warmth of her presence enveloped him, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two beings in the universe, lost in a space beyond time, beyond logic. "You are kind," she said, her voice laced with something that sounded almost like gratitude. "I do not take this lightly, but I need your energy, Elias. I cannot survive this cold without it. Without it, I will wither, my strength will fade, and I will cease to exist. It is the way of my kind. We feed on energy, not from food, but from the life forces around us. From beings like you." Elias's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known something was different about her from the beginning, the strange glow of her skin, the way she shimmered in the firelight, the palpable energy she radiated. But now, hearing her explain it, he realized just how little he truly understood about her species, or about the forces that governed her existence. He looked into her eyes once more, and what he saw there made his resolve strengthen. There was no fear in her gaze, only a deep weariness, a sense of inevitability. She had come to him out of desperation, and now she was placing her trust in him. "Do what you must," he said, his voice steady, though his insides were churning with uncertainty. "I trust you." And then he saw Stephen. The alien nodded, her hand still resting on his arm, her touch almost soothing now. She closed her eyes, and Elias felt a subtle shift in the air between them. The vibrations intensified like the low hum of a distant storm, vibrating against his bones. It was as though she was drawing something from him, something deep and primal, something that he didn't fully understand. Slowly, she moved closer, her body heat blending with his, the coldness in her body now gone. Her skin still shimmered in the firelight, but it was warmer now, softer. She leaned her forehead against his, and for a moment there was nothing but the two of them, connected by some invisible thread, as though their very essences were intertwined. And then she began to draw from him. At first it was subtle. He felt a slight pressure against his chest, like a gentle tug as though something was being siphoned from him. It was not painful, but it was unsettling. He could feel a part of himself being pulled away, leaving him with a strange emptiness. His breath hitched as the alien's energy began to flow into her. It wasn't like anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't a simple transfer of warmth or strength. It was deeper, more intimate, as though their very souls were intertwined. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if she feared causing him harm. But Elias could feel the energy leaving him, could feel the drain, like the slow ebbing of a tide. He tried to breathe deeply, to center himself, but the sensation was overwhelming. It was as if the very essence of who he was, his vitality, his life, was being drawn into her. What? But then something shifted. He felt her energy, a wave of warmth and power surge through him. It wasn't just her strength, no, it was something more. It was as if her life force was blending with his, as if her essence was becoming part of him. The vibrations in the air around them intensified, almost reaching a fever pitch, until Elias thought his body might explode from the intensity of it. But then, just as suddenly, the sensation began to stabilize. The drain on his body slowed, and he felt his energy return in a rush of warmth. When the alien finally pulled away, Elias felt lightheaded, disoriented. His body was exhausted, as if he had run miles without stopping. He blinked, trying to regain his senses, but the world around him felt muffled, distant. The fire seemed to burn brighter, the air warmer than before. The alien was no longer trembling, no longer weak. Her skin, once pale and cold, now glowed with a steady, almost radiant light. She smiled at him, and for the first time since their encounter, it was a genuine smile, a smile of relief, of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and full of emotion. "You have saved me." Elias opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He couldn't quite process what had just happened. He had given her a part of himself, more than just his warmth, more than just his life force. He had given her something deeper, something intangible, and now he was left feeling both drained and fulfilled, as though a part of him was still connected to her. You're welcome," he said, his voice hoarse and shaky. "I don't know what just happened. What did I just give you?" The alien's smile softened, and she reached out, her hand brushing against his cheek once more, her touch warm and comforting. "You gave me the energy I needed to heal. I will survive now, Elias. My people will find me. I will return to them, and they will know what you have done. They will know the kindness you have shown me." Elias nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of everything. He felt a deep sense of relief, but also a strange emptiness. He had helped her. He had saved her. But in doing so, he had given a piece of himself to her. It was a bond that could not be undone. "I don't know if I can fully understand what this means," Elias admitted, his voice quiet. "But I'll never forget this. I don't think I could." He sighed and looked out. "I thought I had seen the cross on a map." The alien's eyes softened, and she reached out, touching his hand gently. "You will not have to understand, Elias. You have already shown more kindness than most would. That is enough. And perhaps, one day, we will meet again." For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, the storm still howling outside. Elias could feel the warmth returning to his body, the energy flowing back into him, but he knew it would never be the same. He had given a part of himself to this alien being, and in doing so, something had shifted within him. The alien slowly rose to her feet, her body now fully restored. She stood tall and graceful, her glowing skin shimmering in the firelight. For a moment she looked like an ethereal being, a creature from another world, and Elias couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries she held. "I will leave now," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I must return to my people. But know this, Elias. Your kindness has not gone unnoticed. It is a gift that I will never forget." With a final glance, the alien turned toward the entrance of the igloo, her form disappearing into the snowstorm that still raged outside. Elias watched her go, feeling both a sense of loss and a strange peace. The storm outside had not subsided, but he knew that the world he had known would never be the same again. He had touched something greater than himself, something beyond the ordinary, and as the wind howled outside, Elias felt the weight of the universe settle around him, as though he had crossed a threshold from which there was no return.